Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 4:06 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Mike Davis from the Article 3 Project joins us at 4:30. We talk about new Attorney General Pam Bondi and what she should do in the role. And Congressman Michael Cloud is here at 5:30. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Parents in Northern Virginia have been on the front lines of fighting back against the excesses of the radical left for years now as they try and stop the child abuse that's been going on inside of the school system, rather than focusing on educating the kids, teaching them how to read, teaching them how to do math. In fact, one of the threats to kids has been very much in the news lately when a registered child sex offender ended up an adult man going into a girls' high school locker room in Arlington. And last week, there was a big school board meeting on this subject, and there were parents who were speaking out against, why do we allow men into the women's room at all?
This is not simply an issue of whether an individual was a registered sex offender. It is also an issue of APS policy permitting biological males in women's locker rooms.
I understand that the policy is intended to be inclusive of transgender individuals, but we must ensure that at the same time, we are continuing to protect other vulnerable populations, such as our children.
I urge you now, for the safety of our students, to enact an emergency policy that establishes distinct and separate restroom and changing facilities for females and males.
It's time for the school board
like
to end
the
preferential treatment of biological males, including those who identify as female, over biological women and girls.
All right, so those were the sane people who were presenting. Here are the crazy people.
The gender identity of the person who entered the pool locker room is completely irrelevant to this conversation.
I've been to all the pools in Arlington County, and anyone, after paying the entrance fee, can enter into any locker room they desire, regardless of what happened. One did. It's horrible. Sadly, sexual predators exist and will probably happen again. There's not many things we can't do to stop it.
Yeah. I also encourage you not to...
If only there was a way. If only there was some way to keep a specific gender out of the other gender's restaurant.
Backpedal on our supportive policies because a sex offender committed a crime. We have been so fortunate to have a school district that supports our LGBTQ plus students.
I also request...
How are you fortunate?
The APS board reject attacks from those within the community on the J2 PIP 2. Attempts to equate protections for trans kids to the actions of a sex offender is disgusting, and it must be rebuked.
That's right. We better leave these kids vulnerable. That's the decent thing to do. Here to discuss what the hell is going on in Northern Virginia, Nick Minock joins us, a great reporter for WJLA, Channel 7 News in Washington, D.C. Nick, good to talk to you as always, sir.
Likewise, Vince. How are you?
I'm doing well, but troubled by all of this. This sex offender who was in that Arlington high school bathroom, what else have you learned about him?
Oh, we know a lot about him. So 7 News was the first to report on this individual. He's 58 years old. His name is Richard Kenneth Cox. If you go on to WJLA.com, you can see his photo. He clearly looks like a man, and he has a lengthy criminal history going back to the late 80s. In the early 90s, he was convicted of a felony for masturbating in front of young children at a gymnasium, according to court records. And these children were under the age of 14 years old. So he spent time in prison. He's a Tier 3 sex offender. A Tier 3 sex offense is the most serious sex offense, which requires people who are Tier 3 sex offenders to register for life every 3 months. So Mr. Cox visited Washington Liberty High School's indoor pool outside of school hours. He told the pool employees he was transgender. They allowed him to use the women's locker room multiple times. WJLA has spoken to a number of women who saw him fully naked in the women's locker room in front of their 9-year-old daughters after children's swim lessons. And yesterday, 7 News reported, not only did he visit Washington Liberty High School, he also visited Wakefield High School in Arlington, Barcroft Sports and Fitness Center in Arlington, and he visited a rec center in Fairfax County at least twice. and that is in Oakton, the Oakmont Rec Center. So, and that's all within a span of 2 months late last year.
And in visiting those rec centers and other facilities, did he also go into the women's locker room in each of those?
Yes, that's exactly what he's accused of.
It's just awful. Okay, so in Arlington, they're reckoning with all of this. Obviously, there are parents who are upset about it. What have they decided to do in Arlington schools?
So with Arlington Public Schools, this is their policy. They allow people who go by their gender identity to use the opposite sex lockers and bathrooms. That's their policy. It's based on gender identity, not biological sex. And as you heard, a lot of parents want this to be rescinded. But the Arlington Public School System, the school board, there's 5 members, they're not rescinding this policy. The changes they are making is they're going to do 100% ID checks, they say, against the sex offender registry, but they're not going to rescind their locker room policy.
So every visitor to an Arlington school is going to be checked against the sex offender registry? That's their solution to this?
That's what they say. Not only for these pools that are available in Arlington outside of school hours, but also for in-school visitors as well. And Fairfax County, they have a very similar policy. So that rec center that I mentioned in Oakton, their policy is Fairfax County government's policy. They fall under Fairfax County government. And Fairfax County government allows people to use facilities based on their gender identity.
Okay, so based on this, what you're describing, if you're a man who is not yet a sex offender on the registry, and you come in and you say you're a woman, you would be entitled to use the women's locker room, go into the women's locker room in Fairfax County and in Arlington.
That's true.
Okay. And insane. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about what the school boards are up to, Nick Minock, because President Trump has signed a number of executive orders that specifically say that the schools are supposed to root out the very things that you and I are talking about, this sort of radical transgender ideology. Also, to get rid of the bigotry that's built into the school system by way of these DEI initiatives. I've noticed that in Loudoun County specifically, this past week, they just voted to say, no, we're keeping DEI. We're not getting rid of it at all. What's the state of play right now between these Northern Virginia school districts and the Trump administration?
Sure. So in Loudoun County Public Schools, you're right, they had a school board meeting this week. School board member Dina Griffiths proposed an amendment to move funding from DEI and put that towards special education. She said that would be able to hire 23 full-time teachers for special education students. Instead, the school board, in a vote that was 7-2, voted against defunding DEI. And the superintendent gave an explanation on why the school board and the school system is committed to equity and diversity and an inclusion. So you can read that full statement on WJLA.com. So they're sticking with it. We also did a story this week on 7 News about America First Legal. They're asking the U.S. Department of Education to investigate Loudoun County Public Schools, Fairfax County Public Schools, Arlington County Public Schools, Prince William County Public Schools, and Alexandria City Public Schools based on alleged Title IX violations and violations of the president's executive order that you just mentioned, Vince. And so we covered that this week, and we heard some responses from the school systems on their bathroom policies, their locker room policies that allow transgender students to use the bathrooms of their choice, not their biological sex. The Prince William County School Board Chair told us he's standing by their policy. He's running for lieutenant governor, by the way. His name's Babar Latif. Fairfax County Public Schools says they're going to be standing by their policy, and of course, LCPS is going to as well.
We're talking
We
about.
have not heard back. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Finish that thought.
We have not heard back from Alexandria and Arlington quite yet on what they're going to do in response to America First Legal's complaint, but we'll let you know when we do.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And I can't, by the way, I can't compliment you enough, Nick Minock, for doggedly covering these stories. I really appreciate it. I always, I'm edified by the reporting, so thank you for that. The money we're talking here, Nick, we're talking a lot of money, right? I mean, the federal government, I just checked the numbers on Fairfax County. It's like in the vicinity of $50 million a year that the feds are giving Fairfax County. the counties stand to lose a lot of money if they stick to these policies and the Trump administration says, okay, fine, no more federal funding, right?
They do. You know, in Fairfax County, they have a budget crunch right now. We reported earlier this year that they have a $300 million budget shortfall. That's after they had a multi-million-dollar surplus just the year prior. And so the county is really in a pickle right now, you could say, because, you know, the schools want more money, but they're sticking by their policies, which they're risking their federal funds potentially by doing. And Fairfax County, the government, the Board of Supervisors, as a result, might have to raise taxes again to make that up. Now, Loudoun County and Prince William County, they have data centers, right? So they have revenues that Fairfax County doesn't get. So we'll see if Loudoun and Prince William counties have to raise taxes as a result. But it's looking like Fairfax County would have to raise taxes, especially if they lost their federal funding for education.
Yeah, I mean, this is a high stakes fight. And so far, President Trump has showed a lot of appetite to engage in these fights to get his agenda achieved. We'll see what that looks like in any of these Northern Virginia counties. I've been saying here on this air, Nick, that I'd like to see President Trump show up at a school board meeting and announce that this federal funding is being stripped unless they change course. I think that would create a splash and definitely a couple of headlines for WJLA. Hey, Nick.
We'd be there to cover it.
Yeah, you would. I know you would. Nick Minock, thank you, sir. I appreciate all of your reporting again and your time today.
Thanks, Vince. Take care.
All right, that's Nick Minock, ABC7, WJLA. As these counties are in open revolt against the American voter, imagine, Fairfax County residents now. So they don't even have the budget to operate the schools, and they're going to put $50 million on the line? Yeah, maybe we could lose that. And then they're going to stick the taxpayers in Fairfax County with a tax hike. How much are you paying already? You got to pay every year just to keep your car on your driveway. You give an extra tax. It's lunacy. And they're going to hit you for more in the end if they want to ride this fight out. All these Fairfax County idiots need to be voted out. That's obviously one of the core lessons from all of this. But they need to stop abusing these kids. That's the key. That's the whole point. And so I'm glad President Trump is waging this fight. He's fighting back against the radical left elements who have really done so much damage to all of these Northern Virginia school districts. It's not just Northern Virginia. It's Montgomery County. It's all over the place. It's everywhere, but especially really densely packed around Washington, D.C. And hopefully something better is ahead of us as President Trump wages this fight. All right, let's see. I've got phone calls coming in. Marco's in Springfield, Virginia, line 1. Hello, Marco. You are on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. Thanks for taking my call. Hey, other than Pat Harity, that school board, the Board of Supervisors, and Jerry Connolly are a bunch of left-wing Looney Tunes that are going to cost us all lots of money. I don't know. Voter apathy is probably responsible for this, but they're all a bunch of Looney Tune lefties. And I'm sorry, they all need to go.
And they're hurting
Pat
the
Harity,
kids.
if he gets to be a lieutenant governor, I wish him luck, but we'll be losing a very valuable seat if he does.
Yeah, they're really hurting the kids too. It's crazy what's going on in Fairfax County, and they're so proud of how much damage they're doing. It's enough. It's enough. Thank you, Marco.
Absolutely.
All right, and
you.
let's see, Jeff from Herndon now, line 2. Hello, Jeff. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince.
Hey there, Jeff.
Thanks for taking my call, man.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Hey, this is an awesome and very important topic, and I tell you what, the only reason why these cognitively dissonant people are still in position is because our elections, the obfuscation built into these laws is so profound that the only way to really knock it out is about 5 elections of everybody carrying and showing up and putting their eyes on the election system and just continually letting people know, because I know, I think it's pretty clear these people are not in position because, there are fair elections. It's George Soros money. It's now we know it's USAID money.
Yeah, well, we know that Soros money is involved, and especially Steve Descano and these ridiculous people in Fairfax. I mean, you're totally right about that. And there's also let's be honest, a lot of crazy lefties who live in Fairfax. That's true. Who are voting to sustain this madness, Jeff?
Well, that's just true. And unfortunately, I don't know why it's a collection of that. Although I will say, every time I've traveled, around and probably 50 different capitals around the world, it does seem to be a collection of people who are looking for handouts. And that's people who are looking for $1 million handouts, as well as people looking for, your standard, your standard government meal tickets. But and not to be pejorative towards people who need a lifting hand, but it's built in. But the actual city, this blows me away that it's so hard to break down this particular thing.
Yeah.
Targeting our children. Since when did children become a target that was legitimate?
I know. It's infuriating. And there is one thing I do think, and somewhere in the back of my head I wonder about this. As President Trump tries to pare down the size of the federal government, if he's able to do that successfully, how many bitter, emotionally incontinent lefties is he going to be able to drive away from the Northern Virginia area? Do you think it's possible? Do you think if he can get enough of these guys to quit, who are just angry that they even have to work in a Trump administration, I'm going, I'm leaving, I'm getting out of this area. Well, good. Maybe we can win back Virginia. Maybe that could help, Jeff.
Oh, man, one can hope.
One can hope. I do a lot of hoping. Sometimes it pays off. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff in Herndon today. Coming up, I've got some breaking news for you about women's sports and just how protected they are thanks to President Trump's efforts. And Mike Davis is going to join us in mere moments. He'll talk about the new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and everything that she has ahead of her. Hey, good afternoon to you. 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up, Congressman Michael Cloud will join us at 5:30. And you can join us at 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. You heard just a moment ago, Heather sharing our breaking news today in this hour. The NCAA is now following President Trump's lead and making it so that only women can participate in women's sports all across the NCAA. This change, long overdue. It should have never been required. And yet here we are. So some great news today on that front in the last few minutes. Again, the number to join us today, 888-630-9625. We've got a new Attorney General. Thank the good Lord. Pam Bondi is in place, sworn in yesterday by Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, President Trump there, Pam Bondi saying that she's not going to let President Trump down and getting to work right away. Here's President Trump this morning talking about what he needs the Attorney General to do.
To confront such weaponization and religious persecution, today I'm signing an executive order to make our Attorney General, who's a great person, she's going to be a great Attorney General, Pam Bondi, the head of a task force, brand new, to eradicate anti-Christian bias. About time, right? Anti-Christian bias.
Including and especially within the federal government. Joining us now to discuss is Mike Davis. He's the founder and president of the Article 3 Project. Mike, good to have you back with us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so Mike, let's get this out of the way up front. You were the right's favorite to become the next Attorney General. Everybody wanted you, but we're settling for Pam Bondi. What do we get with Attorney General Pam Bondi, Mike Davis?
You get a much more experienced, better, smarter, more effective Attorney General in Pam Bondi who can actually get confirmed rather than crazy Mike Davis. I am ecstatic about Pam Bondi.
What kind of work does she have ahead of her? I see that there's a lot of things she's up to right away, just going after the weaponization within the government itself and trying to figure out who's on Team America and who's not, right?
She has a big job ahead of her because we saw that our justice systems at every level, the U.S. Justice Department, along with including the FBI, state AGs, local DAs have been politicized and weaponized against Trump. His top aides like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, who went to prison, his January 6 supporters who were politically persecuted, according to the Supreme Court's Fisher decision last June, parents outraged by gender chaos in schools and the resulting rapes in bathrooms, Christians, including 75-year-old Christians, going to prison for praying at abortion clinics. Well, the Biden regime gave amnesty to the Bidens who took $23 million from our worst enemies, BLM, Antifa, Hamas, Planned Parenthood activists. Pam Bondi needs to clean house at the Justice Department, make sure it's never politicized and weaponized again, and it's focusing on real crimes like violent crimes, like migrant crimes, instead of going after political enemies. This could never happen again.
You know, Mike Davis, it seems like there's a lot of lingering problems. You're going over some of them, but one of the headlines we've seen this week is that, well, here's the Associated Press. Justice Department official accuses FBI chief of insubordination, tamps down talk of revenge on agents. They point to the acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove, who put out a memo this week accusing the FBI's acting leadership of, quote, insubordination, apparently for slow-walking information about which agents and employees in the FBI have been involved in targeting Joe Biden's political opponents.
Emil Bove is the acting number 2 in the Justice Department. He was one of President Trump's attorneys on this unprecedented Republican lawfare for the last 4 years against President Trump. It really goes back 8 years to Crossfire Hurricane. Emil's trying to get an understanding of what's happened with our FBI when you've had something like 5,000 FBI employees working on January 6 cases. They did 2,500 investigations on January 6th, while the Biden Justice Department ignored violent crime, including these violent migrant Venezuelan gangs and Mexican cartels that are ravaging America's communities. We want to ignore that, and the FBI is going to have 20% or more of its workforce focused on January 6th. That's unacceptable. And as the political leadership of the Justice Department, it is absolutely not only their response, it is their duty to figure out how these resources are misallocated so this never happens again. We should never have a politicized and weaponized FBI to go after political opponents while they're ignoring real crime.
Also, I understand that as a part of the weaponization working group that Pam Bondi is standing up, she is going to review not just the federal government's behavior, including with Special Counsel Jack Smith, but she's also going to take a closer look at Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, as well as New York Attorney General Letitia James. I would imagine that Big Fat Fannie Willis down in Fulton County, Georgia, would also be subjected to some scrutiny here. What does she have to do when it comes to these people?
Well, I think this is going to lead to what we've been talking about on your show for several years now, which is a federal civil rights probe under 18 U.S.C. Section 241, conspiracy against rights. When you politicize and weaponize intel agencies and law enforcement against your political opponents for non-crimes, that is the very definition of 18 U.S.C. Section 241, conspiracy against rights. This is one of the counts that Jack Smith brought against President Trump, one of the 4 counts in D.C. for the bogus January 6 case there. So these prosecutors and agents and other operatives, co-conspirators, are very well aware of what this law is because they try to use it against Trump. So I would say to Jack Smith and Jay Bratz and these January 6th prosecutors and agents, along with these Democrat prosecutors like Tish James, Fannie Willis, Alvin Bragg, Nathan Wade, Chris Mays out in Arizona, I would say to them, they better lawyer up because it sounds like there are going to be severe legal, political, and financial consequences for their criminal conspiracy against President Trump, his top aides, and his supporters.
Also, excuse me. Also, my understanding is that Pam Bondi is taking a hard look at sanctuary jurisdictions across the country. We have a number of cities led by Democrats who refuse to cooperate with immigration enforcement. They call themselves sanctuary cities, and they harbor illegal aliens in the process, especially ones who've committed violent crimes who get out of the jails and then they refuse to tell ICE that that's happening. What can Pam Bondi do here in terms of going after these sanctuary cities and getting them to cooperate?
Well, I would open up a criminal probe under 8 USC Section 1324, which makes it a very serious federal crime to harbor criminal aliens. And that is exactly what these jurisdictions are doing when they're putting these illegal immigrants up in hotels and giving them, their cost of living and importing them into their states. More problematically, if they obstruct ICE, if they go out of their way to stop to obstruct these ICE investigations, that's obstruction of justice. You also have the federal crime of conspiracy. There are countless federal crimes involved when you have state and local government officials harboring illegal aliens and obstructing the federal effort to get them the hell out of our country.
So we've seen before some of these local officials, what they'll do is they'll have an illegal alien exit, say, out of the back door of the jail in order to prevent the ICE agents who are out front from being able to capture them. If they did something like that, that's exactly what you're talking about, right?
Well, I mean, it sounds like it. If you have an ICE detainer on an illegal immigrant, you have these government officials. Look, under our constitutional order, the federal government cannot commandeer state and local officials, meaning they can't turn state and local officials into federal puppets. So these state and local officials technically don't have to cooperate with immigration enforcement, but they certainly cannot harbor illegal immigrants. They certainly cannot obstruct federal law enforcement. Yeah. And that's when you go from legal to criminal.
It's just remarkable. Okay, so what else do you think Pam Bondi needs to focus on in this role as Attorney General now?
I think Pam Bondi is already proving on day one that she's ready to lead. She was the Attorney General of Florida for 8 years. She's ready to go. She came in and did numerous Attorney General orders, and she reprioritized her Justice Department to focus on real crimes instead of going after political enemies. And she's going to hold those people who did that accountable so this never happens again.
Yes, and she's going to have to recruit too, right? I mean, we need very competent and professional FBI agents and lawyers working in the Justice Department in order to make this agency deserving of respect again.
That's exactly right. When you have it started under Obama with Crossfire Hurricane, but it was really on steroids under Biden. And these federal prosecutors and agents and other co-conspirators really shattered the public confidence and trust in law enforcement. And we saw this in this last election when we made this lawfare against President Trump and his top aides and his supporters a referendum. And the American people rendered their verdict, and it was a very clear verdict on November 5th, that this Republic-ending lawfare and election interference by these Biden Democrats is totally unacceptable, and there has to be consequences for this so it never happens again.
Okay. Real quick for you, I saw on your social media today, Mike Davis, that you had a meeting with the current U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., Ed Martin, who, by the way, I'm loving everything Ed Martin is up to right now. What a breath of fresh air after that awful Matthew Graves occupied that role and let crime run rampant in Washington, D.C. What do you think of Ed Martin's time right now as U.S. Attorney?
Ed Martin is a friend of mine. He's been a friend for a long time. He is a very good lawyer. He's very smart, and he's very focused at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office to get rid of these political persecutions, according to the Supreme Court's Fisher decision, to make sure people are held accountable, and to make sure that the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office and law enforcement in D.C. focuses on real crimes like violent carjackings and robberies and murders and rapes and the other crimes that Matthew Graves and Lisa Monaco and Merrick Garland seem to ignore for the last 4 years. Ed Martin's going to make sure that we focus on real crimes in D.C. where it affects real Americans, right? And it disproportionately harms poor Black families trapped in these third world hellholes, crime-ridden hellholes. Those are the people who suffer the most when you have a politicized justice system that's going after political enemies instead of real criminals.
Yeah, and I saw that among the many great things that Ed Martin's up to, in addition to focusing on that local crime in D.C. and actually trying to hold criminals accountable, He also sent a letter to Chuck Schumer asking Schumer to explain his 2020 remarks on the steps of the Supreme Court, calling for what looked like violence against sitting United States Supreme Court justices. It certainly set off a wave of real attempts to harm those justices. Do you think we'll see more of that, where Ed Martin is demanding answers from these reckless officials who seem to be calling for war and insurrection?
Yeah, I mean, it is a federal crime to hold obstruction of justice campaigns outside of federal judges' homes, including even courthouses. You can't threaten federal judges, especially while they're deciding pending cases. And that's exactly what happened when you had Chuck Schumer go to the steps of the Supreme Court and threaten Supreme Court justices, including my former boss, Neil Gorsuch, on the Supreme Court, that essentially Schumer was going to threaten violence against them if they ruled the wrong way on the Dobbs case, the abortion case. And guess what? It just happened that these Democrat operatives held these illegal obstruction of justice campaigns at their homes. These justices and their families got sent to safe houses. You had Justice Kavanaugh, his wife Ashley, and their 2 teenage daughters face a 1 a.m. assassination attempt that was a hell of a lot closer than people understand. And this is unacceptable. It's totally unacceptable. And there's going to be accountability for this.
I hope so. Finally, Ed Martin, I see he's the acting U.S. Attorney for D.C. Will that become permanent? Do you know if President Trump's going to nominate him to stay in that role for a while?
Yeah, so he was appointed, and you get 120-day appointments as the interim U.S. Attorney. He's the U.S. Attorney. And then the D.C. court can extend that if they want to. The D.C. court's filled with a bunch of left-wing hacks and weak Republicans. So I have been very publicly advocating for President Trump to nominate Ed very fast. He has about 100 days left in his term. And if we get him nominated, I can get the Senate to get him confirmed. And so we can continue his job as the U.S. Attorney for all 4 years and really clean up crime in D.C. and deliver justice for these poor black families in D.C. who have lived through hell under the Biden regime.
Okay, good. Well, when that gets going, let us know, because we'll help you browbeat the Senate into submission. Can't wait for that. Hey, thank you very much, Mike Davis. Always good to talk to you. Thanks for being a Patriot, sir. All right, we're learning some more information out of the White House now. The president looking to advance a big tax plan. Here's Karoline Leavitt in the last few hours.
So these are the tax priorities of the Trump administration that the president has laid out for members in that meeting today. No tax on tips, which is obviously a very public campaign promise that the president made. No tax on seniors' Social Security. No tax on overtime pay. Renewing President Trump's 2017 middle-class tax cuts. Again, these are the president's priorities. Adjusting the SALT cap. Eliminate all the special tax breaks for billionaire sports team owners. Close the carried interest tax deduction loophole.
Ooh.
Tax cuts for Made in America products. This will be the largest tax cut in history for middle-class working Americans. The president is committed to working with Congress to get this done.
He's putting pressure on the NFL teams. He's getting rid of the tax breaks for the billionaire stadium owners. This is fantastic. I love this. No wonder they pulled end racism from the end zone for this weekend's game. They're getting rid of the craziness right now in the hopes of sucking up to President Trump, who is supposed to be at that game this weekend. That should be interesting, as he ends up with a bigger motorcade and a bigger security requirement than Taylor Swift. She'll be inconvenienced. She'll have to get there a couple hours early to get through security. This never happens. It happens today, baby. And, I got to get into this a little bit more, the details here. That SALT tax adjustment, that's kind of interesting. The carried interest loophole going away? Really? So the private equity managers, the guys who are using other people's money, aren't able to collect fees and consider it long-term capital gains? Do you get that deal? Does that work for you? Do you get low taxes on all of your earnings? And it's not even your money? It's so wild. President Trump doing something Washington has threatened to do forever. The left keeps claiming, we're going to close the carried interest loophole. Trump's actually doing it. As always, coming up, Congressman Michael Cloud will be with us in the next hour. I'll talk a little bit more about this tax plan, too.